The suburban silence of Oakhaven was not broken, it was shattered. One moment, 10-year-old Maya Thorne was laughing, watching her golden retriever, Barnaby, chase a stray leaf across the manicured lawn. The next, a metallic crack echoed off the brick houses, a sound Elias Thorne had heard 10,000 times in places the world chose to forget. Barnaby didn't even yelp. He simply collapsed, his golden fur staining a deep, horrific crimson. Maya's scream was raw, a jagged sound of pure heartbreak that tore through the afternoon air. She dropped to the pavement, her small hands frantically trying to cover the wound in the dog's side, her eyes wide with a shock no child should ever know. Officer Miller stood 10 feet away, his service weapon still trembling in his grip. His partner, Officer Vance, stood beside him, face as cold as stone. The animal looked aggressive, Miller stammered, his voice thin and hollow, though the dog had been on a leash. He didn't look at the sobbing girl, he looked at his partner, already calculating the paperwork, the excuses, the lie. They had no idea whose life they had just invaded. They didn't see the elderly neighbor on the porch, a woman who knew exactly who Maya's father was. As she watched the officers loom over the grieving child, she wasn't calling 911. She was calling a secure, encrypted line that bypassed every civilian switchboard in the country. Halfway across the globe, in a dark room illuminated only by green monitors, a phone vibrated. Elias Thorne, the most lethal operative the Delta Force had ever produced, picked it up. In 10 seconds, his world shifted from mission to extinction. The men in Oakhaven had made a mistake. They hadn't just killed a dog, they had summoned a storm. Before we continue, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more intense stories like this one. Tell us where you are watching from. The neighborhood stood frozen in an unnatural stillness. Maya's cries pierced the air, a high-pitched wail that made the birds stop mid-song and caused neighbors to peer anxiously from behind curtains. The 8-year-old girl trembled on the sidewalk, her small body racked with sobs that echoed off the silent houses. Officer Miller reholstered his weapon with shaking hands, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool afternoon air. His breath came in ragged gasps. He was lunging, he whispered, more to convince himself than anyone else. The words hung hollow in the air. Officer Vance stood beside him, weathered face impassive, hand resting casually on his belt. He surveyed the scene with cold detachment. Yeah. Threat neutralized. Get the kid away from the carcass. They approached Maya with mechanical efficiency, not as comforters, but as cleaners finishing an unpleasant job. Neither officer noticed how the light seemed to darken around them, or how the bloodstains spread across the concrete like an accusation. Maya's beloved German shepherd, Barnaby, lay motionless on the pavement. Neither man saw the storm gathering on the horizon. Neither knew they had just awakened something far more dangerous than any dog. The silence between Maya's sobs felt like a countdown ticking toward something inevitable and terrible. In a concrete bunker in an undisclosed location, Elias Thorne sat at a metal desk surrounded by mission reports and classified documents. The satellite phone rang, cutting through the sterile silence. He answered with his usual economy of words. Thorne. Mrs. Gable's elderly voice trembled on the other end. Elias, they shot Barnaby. Right in front of Maya. They're being cruel to her. So cruel. Elias didn't scream. He didn't swear or slam his fist on the desk. Instead, a cold, familiar stillness settled over him like a second skin, what his unit had called the combat trance. The special operator disappeared. The commander emerged. He stood slowly, leaving classified documents untouched on the desk. Tell Maya I'm coming home, he said, his voice like grinding stones, rough, inexorable, final. He hung up before Mrs. Gable could respond. His mind was already calculating flight paths from Eastern Europe, weapon caches he maintained stateside, tactical approaches. The man who had spent 15 years in the shadows, who had toppled regimes and hunted terrorists, was now redirecting all that lethal expertise toward a single target. He walked past his commanding officer without explanation, shedding his military identity with each step. Behind him, alarms began to sound. Someone important had just gone dark. But Elias Thorne was already a ghost, and ghosts answer to no one. 24 hours later, a black SUV rolled into Oakhaven, seeming to absorb the afternoon light. Elias Thorne emerged, his presence making the air feel heavier, the shadows deeper. His lean frame moved with economy and purpose, every gesture calculated, nothing wasted. He didn't go to his house first. Instead, he walked directly to the bloodstain on the sidewalk, rust brown now, already fading, ignored by neighbors who hurried past with averted eyes. Elias knelt, touching the dried blood with 2 fingers. His jaw tightened imperceptibly, the only outward sign of the fury coiling inside him. Inside his house, Maya sat wrapped in a blanket on the couch, eyes vacant and red-rimmed from days of crying. She didn't react when Elias entered, didn't even look up. The spark that had always animated her, the quick smile, the boundless energy, had been extinguished. Elias knelt before her, bringing himself to eye level. He offered no false comfort, no empty platitudes about time healing wounds or Barnaby being in a better place. Instead, he spoke with quiet certainty. I see you, Maya. And I see what they did. I'm going to make it right. For the first time since the shooting, Maya's eyes focused. Her small hand reached out, gripping his. Something besides grief crossed her face. Hope. Elias stood, his shadow falling across the room like a declaration of war. Elias walked into the police precinct with the gait of a man who owned the air around him. Officers glanced up from their desks, then quickly away. Something about him unsettled. Perhaps the way he moved, or the cold calculation in his eyes, or simply the sense that violence followed him like a faithful dog. He approached the front desk with measured steps. Incident report. Officer Miller. Yesterday's shooting. Sheriff Atkins looked up from his paperwork, taking in the flannel shirt and worn jeans. Just another civilian. He'd dealt with hundreds like this, angry, grief-stricken, ultimately impotent against the blue wall. Accidents happen, Thorne. The dog was a threat. Go home before you make things difficult for yourself. Elias leaned over the desk, close enough that Atkins could see his own reflection in those cold, dark eyes. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You have 12 hours to fire Miller and Vance. Public apology. Full accountability. Atkins laughed. Loud, confident. Other officers joined in, a chorus of dismissive mirth. Or what? You'll sue? Get a lawyer, buddy. This conversation is over. Elias didn't blink, didn't move. 12 hours. He turned and walked out, each footstep deliberate and final. The laughter died behind him as officers exchanged uncertain glances. Sheriff Atkins watched him go, still smiling. But his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee. It was the last time he would feel truly safe. That night, Elias became a ghost. His house sat dark and seemingly empty, but inside, he operated like the intelligence specialist he'd been trained to be. No guns. No dramatic confrontations. This was the careful, methodical work that preceded every successful operation. He sat surrounded by equipment, thermal scanner, high-frequency police radio interceptor, multiple monitors glowing softly in the darkness. Through headphones, he listened to radio chatter, his fingers typing coordinates and notes into a laptop. Miller's voice crackled through, took down a beast today. Thing was massive. Almost felt bad for the kid, but hey, job's a job. Buy me another round. Elias's expression didn't change. He simply marked Miller's location, O'Malley's bar, downtown, and continued building his database. His screens displayed a comprehensive intelligence picture, home addresses, vehicle registrations, family photos scraped from social media, shift schedules, patrol routes, financial records, disciplinary files. Miller, married, 2 kids, mortgage on a starter home, drives a Ford F-150, gambles on weekends. Vance, divorced, lives alone, owes back child support, drinks every Thursday at Rosie's Tavern, has a girlfriend in the next county. He knew their vulnerabilities, their patterns, their fears. He knew the make of their cars and the names of their children. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice delivered with surgical precision. The hunt had officially begun. If you're gripped by Elias's quest for justice, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more intense stories like this one. Your support keeps these stories coming. Officer Miller slept fitfully, his dreams troubled by the image of the little girl's face. A freezing draft pulled him toward consciousness. He reached for the bedside lamp, fumbling in the darkness. Click. Click. Nothing. A voice emerged from the shadows, quiet and inexorable. You didn't even look her in the eye when you killed him. Miller's heart exploded into panic. He scrambled for his service weapon on the nightstand. His hand found only empty space. The holster was there, but the gun was gone. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, a silhouette materialized at the foot of his bed. Not moving, barely breathing, impossibly terrifying in its stillness. The figure seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 12 hours is down to 6, Miller. Miller's hand found his phone. Before he could unlock it, the world turned white and sound became a physical force. The flashbang detonated with surgical precision, loud enough to disorient, not loud enough to wake the neighbors or his wife sleeping in the guest room. Miller screamed, blinded and deaf, hands covering his face. When his vision finally cleared, early dawn light streamed through the window. The room was empty. On his dresser sat his service weapon, melted into an unrecognizable lump of metal, still warm to the touch. Beside it, a note in precise handwriting. The girl's name was Maya. Miller's hands shook uncontrollably as he realized he'd wet himself. The nightmare had only just begun. The precinct descended into chaos. Miller sat in an interview room, eyes wild, hands trembling around a coffee cup he couldn't quite bring to his lips. In my house, he rambled to anyone who would listen. In my bedroom. A demon, I'm telling you, a fucking demon was standing right there. How did he get past the locks? How did he? Sheriff Atkins slammed his hand on the desk. Enough. Vance, get a SWAT team to Thorne's house. Full tactical. I want this psychopath in custody within the hour. The SWAT team moved with professional efficiency, breaching Thorne's front door with a battering ram at precisely 0600 hours. They flooded inside, weapons raised, flashlights cutting through the darkness, voices calling, clear, as they moved from room to room. But the house was empty. No furniture. No girl. No Elias. Just bare walls and dusty floors that showed no signs of recent habitation. The team leader lowered his weapon, confusion replacing tactical focus. Sheriff, you need to see this. Pinned to the living room wall was a single photograph, printed in high resolution, impossible to dismiss or explain away. Sheriff Atkins accepting an envelope from real estate developer Mark Harrison 3 years ago. The image captured everything, the furtive glance, the exchange, the guilt. Beneath it, written in the same precise handwriting, this is only the beginning. You have 4 hours. Atkins stared at the photograph, blood draining from his face. How did he? The question died in his throat. The hunters realized they were standing in a carefully constructed trap. And somewhere in the darkness, watching through cameras he would never retrieve, Elias smiled. At midnight, every light in Oakhaven died simultaneously. The power grid that served the small town simply stopped. Total darkness descended like a shroud. Inside the police precinct, emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in harsh red shadows. Officers scrambled, voices rising in panic, hands reaching for weapons that suddenly felt inadequate. Elias entered through the ventilation system he'd mapped days earlier, moving with the lethal grace of a predator who'd done this 100 times before. One by one, night shift officers were neutralized, zip-tied with their own restraints, gagged with their own equipment, left in interrogation rooms and supply closets. They never saw him coming. Most never saw him at all. He reached Sheriff Atkins's office last. The door was locked, but locks meant nothing to a man with Elias's training. Inside, Atkins sat behind his desk, shotgun trembling in his hands, sweat pouring down his face despite the cold air. Elias dropped from the ceiling panels like a nightmare made flesh. Before Atkins could even aim, the shotgun was twisted away, dismantled in seconds, its components scattered across the floor. Sign the confession. Elias spread documents across the desk. Years of corruption, bribery, evidence tampering, witness intimidation. All meticulously documented, cross-referenced, irrefutable. I have a family, Atkins's voice broke. So did Maya. Elias slid a pen across the desk. For Barnaby. For every person you were supposed to protect and failed. Outside, sirens approached, state police, summoned by anonymous tips and damning evidence packages. Atkins's hand shook as he reached for the pen, his whole world crumbling around him. Elias had already calculated his exit. Justice didn't need a witness. Only results. Sunrise painted the sky in shades of gold and pink as state police vehicles lined the street outside the precinct. Officers in handcuffs were loaded into cruisers. Miller, Vance, Atkins, and 6 others implicated in the web of corruption Elias had unraveled. News vans arrived, cameras capturing everything, reporters already crafting narratives about small-town corruption and one man's quest for justice. Elias sat on his porch, Maya tucked securely under his arm, watching the spectacle unfold. The combat trance had finally released its grip. The cold stillness that had sustained him through the mission was fading, replaced by something warmer, more human. A familiar car pulled up, breaking through the police barricade with a wave of credentials. Sergeant Chen emerged, a genuine smile on his weathered face. Heard you might need this, he called out. He opened the back door of his vehicle. A young German Shepherd puppy bounded out, silver-tipped coat gleaming in the morning light, eyes bright with puppy enthusiasm, completely unaware of the drama surrounding its arrival. Maya's eyes widened, life flooding back into her face for the first time in a week. Really? She whispered, almost afraid to hope. Really? Elias confirmed. She ran to the puppy, both tumbling into the grass in a tangle of laughter and excited barking. The sound was pure, unburdened, beautiful, the sound of healing beginning. Chen sat beside Elias on the porch steps, watching the scene with satisfaction. Think you'll stay retired this time? Elias watched Maya and the puppy play, watched her smile return, watched the weight lift from her small shoulders. Yeah, he said quietly. I think so. The debt was paid. The storm had passed, leaving only justice and the possibility of peace in its wake. The morning sun cast long shadows across the backyard where Maya threw a tennis ball for the 3rd time. The German Shepherd puppy, no longer quite so small, bounded after it with unbridled joy, silver coat shimmering in the light. She'd named him Sentinel, and he lived up to that name, never leaving Maya's side. What did you think of Elias's methods? Was justice truly served? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to hit the notification bell so you never miss our next story. Until next time, stay strong, stay brave, and protect what matters most.